Hello and welcome to Maxim Foods Inside Track, brought to you at Brisbane HQ here. Beautiful sunny day. Just returned from the US from ADPI function in Chicago. It was great to get the perspective from both the US and the EU, get over the other side of the globe and see how things are done over there. Yeah, much the same as what we've been saying over previous fortnights. Milk supply is still low globally. EU under some real pressure in terms of increased costs of production, and it's been a reasonably flat start to the season there in the big milking regions of Germany, the Netherlands and France. So not experiencing a huge season over in the EU. In the US, costs of feed really impacting the amount of milk being produced, but still some product there to be exported into the global markets. In terms of the freight piece, it's only gone from bad to worse. Lockdowns in China have really put the cat amongst the pigeons there in terms of global vessels. There's a lot of disruption over on the Chinese side. The US has improved a little bit, but yeah, still a real conversation piece is that disruptive global freight space at the moment. With all this global volatility, lockdowns in China, vessel disruptions, we did see a correction last night on the GDT across all the commodities. So this may present a buying opportunity for people in the next fortnight. Having a look at whole milk powder, so last night we saw a correction on the GDT. We had China participating at about 56%, so a lot of people thought that those guys would be down on participation, but it was more the periphery markets of Southeast Asia, North Africa and the Middle East that sat out. So lack of competition in that auction meant that we saw a relief in price. Instant whole milk powder is still in very short supply and pricing is holding up, but for your standard whole milk we did see some relief. What this means in the short to medium term, New Zealand at the end of their season, there's still going to be a constraint in supply, so we won't see oodles of products, and we should see whole milk powder flatline for the next 3 months through to next season. We've spoken a lot about skim milk powder over the last 6 months. It really has been the champion of the dairy commodities. It has dropped back again on auction last night, but still relatively high and at sort of 12-year highs at the moment. That demand for non-fat is still quite high. Hard to get product out of the US. EU pricing still out of the money, so still strong demand for Australian New Zealand skim. We should, obviously coming into the end of season, we won't see a lot more of supply, so we probably anticipate a reasonably flat market there for the next 3 to 6 months. Butterfat was probably the biggest mover on GDT last night, both AMF and butter. We saw a correction there. A lot of participation on the auction. North Asia was still quite strong relative to the lockdown. However, the Middle East and North Africa, due to Ramadan, basically didn't participate. So once again, fundamentally, we still see a higher pricing out of the US, hard to get product out of. EU pricing still well above Australian, New Zealand, and New Zealand pricing, although a correction last night, still pretty good value. So in the same vein of skim milk powder, we will probably see a relatively flat market for the next 3 to 6 months, if not a bit of a bounce back after last night's correction. Having a look at whey powder, in terms of the protein side of things, the biggest takeaway from the ADPI conference was that protein is still in very much high demand. So WPI, WPCs, higher protein milk, caseinates, etc., caseins, globally in very short supply, and is a real motivator for manufacturers to channel that milk into the higher protein, higher value commodities. Won't see supply correcting itself anytime soon, and demand just seems to continue to soar. So we'll see some really high pricing well into 2023, we anticipate, on proteins. In terms of sweet whey powder, we see demand flattening out. Supply is still quite tight as people channel that whey powder into higher protein. We still should see some relatively high pricing against the last sort of 12 months through the next 3 to 6 months. We don't see much change on whey powder. Finishing off with cheese, in the US side of things, domestic demand is quite high, and also export demand for US cheese is high. So we see a lot of US cheese getting exported over to Asia and the Middle East, where demand is still quite strong. Even with vessel delays, etc., we're still seeing a lot of cheese leaving the US. In the EU, pricing's still quite high, but there's enough domestic demand there to swallow that up. In terms of Australia and New Zealand, we did see the GDT come back last night. However, there really is a shortage of Australian and New Zealand cheese. So what we're seeing in Australia, with a really strong food service demand picking up, we're seeing a big shortage in cheddar in Australia. Thanks very much for listening to today's Inside Track. Never a dull moment in the world of dairy. I hope to see you again in the next fortnight.